Hi, folks. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about Iran again. As I mentioned yesterday, there was a peace deal signed between Iran and the United States. Unfortunately, early this morning, around 4 a.m. Pacific time, Israel violated that agreement and launched strikes inside Lebanon, effectively causing Iran to announce that it would be stepping away from the peace negotiations. That development also caused Vice President J.D. Vance to cancel a planned trip so he could continue working on negotiations toward a more formalized and extended peace agreement beyond the current memorandum of understanding. Now, needless to say, this isn't particularly surprising. Israeli leaders had already made it clear that they were unhappy with the agreement and were not exactly eager to abide by it. As we discussed a few days ago, Israel has broken basically every ceasefire record in history, so the idea that this agreement would immediately run into problems was hardly unexpected. Now, according to Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel struck roughly 150 sites inside Lebanon. The justification being given is that 4 IDF soldiers were killed. Now, what often gets left out of that discussion, however, is where those soldiers were operating. Those 4 IDF soldiers were inside Lebanese territory. They were operating as an occupying force inside Lebanon. Whether you agree or disagree with that reality, that's the context. Hezbollah attacked 4 IDF soldiers who were operating within Lebanon, and Israel then used that incident as justification for launching strikes on approximately 150 targets across Lebanon. Now, one of the responses to this escalation that really caught a lot of people's attention on X came from Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's Minister of National Security. He responded by posting on X saying, "For every tear of an Israeli mother, 1,000 Lebanese mothers must weep. All of Lebanon must burn." And let's be honest, that's a bit of an insane statement, psychopathic to say the least, and absolutely genocidal rhetoric. There's really no other way to see this. And he didn't stop there, by the way. He continued saying, "With all due respect to Americans, Israel must make it clear to the entire world that the blood of our sons and the security of our citizens are not forfeit. All of Lebanon must burn." Apparently, he felt the need to repeat that part. Anyway, he went on again, saying, "Our supreme duty is to protect the citizens of Israel and the soldiers of the IDF, and this commitment takes precedence over every other consideration. I told the prime minister, even in our private meetings, for every tear of an Israeli mother, 1,000 Lebanese mothers must weep." Enough with the ping pong in the Middle East. You don't win with measured responses and restraint. You need to go berserk, to obliterate, to crush the terror. Again, that's just purely genocidal rhetoric. I don't know any other way to describe this. There's no way to sugarcoat this. It cannot and should not be tolerated. This is not the kind of thing America should be backing. We should not be diplomatically backing this sort of garbage. We should not be militarily backing this sort of garbage. We should not be backing this in any way, shape, or form. America is not subjected to Israel. America is the world's superpower. America has the most powerful military in the world. We do not have to tolerate this kind of rhetoric, and we certainly do not have to sponsor it. We don't have to defend this kind of stuff. We don't have to provide diplomatic cover for it either. Frankly, that's pretty much all that needs to be said about that. Now, all of this leads into another controversy that unfolded today. See, for a long time, we've had pro-Israeli government agents within our political system and media ecosystem openly and brazenly pushing American foreign policy toward unconditional support for Israel. I've talked about this extensively, including how some of these individuals have infiltrated the Republican Party here in California, here in Los Angeles, and gone after genuine patriots, genuine America First conservatives for refusing to fall in line with unconditional support for Israel. Well, it seems like some of these people are finally starting to pay the piper. Today, the White House Rapid Response Account, the official account dedicated to supporting the president's America First agenda and holding the fake news accountable, responded to one of the most subversive pro-Israel government agents in American media, Batya Ungar-Sargon. Batya has been extremely critical of both President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance for pursuing a peace deal. Think about how insane that is for a second. We're talking about people attacking the president and vice president of the United States because they're trying to prevent another military entanglement in the Middle East. He's trying to keep American troops out of a war that from the outset has been one of the most unpopular military entanglements in modern American history. Yet somehow, according to these people, the villain in this story is the guy trying to negotiate peace and keep Americans out of another endless foreign conflict. Anyway, This is what she said on News Nation.
If this was a great deal for America and a bad deal for Israel, I would champion it because I see myself as an America first American. The problem is it's an absolutely disastrous deal that has brought us to our knees weeks before our 250th birthday. This is an utter humiliation of the United States, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it, but especially Iran knows it. They are celebrating this. They are still calling us the enemy. And while Iran celebrates this and sneers at us for totally capitulating when we had complete military superiority over them, J.D. Vance is out there criticizing Israel, making up fantasies about how it is Israel's fault and Israel wants Iran to be a failed state. And if only Israel would lay down its arms and allow Hezbollah to keep attacking it, there would be peace in the Middle East. It is disgusting. It is the complete Tucker Carlsonification of the Vice President of the United States. And it is utterly deplorable. The only good thing I can say about it is if this was a dry run for Vance 2028, we sure learned a lot.
Now, Batya shared this clip herself with a caption saying, VP J.D. Vance just brought the U.S. to its knees with a humiliating deal weeks before our 250th birthday, and he has the audacity to blame Israel for the terrible situation we're in. We're watching the Tucker Carlsonification of our vice president in real time. Now, what's interesting about this characterization is several things, because if you'll notice, from the beginning of the clip we watched, Batya couches her position by saying, if this were a terrible deal for Israel and a good deal for America, I would love it because I'm America first. That's how she frames the entire argument. And then she immediately goes on to defend Israel and disparage the president and the vice president, effectively arguing that they've sold America out. Now, what she's leaving out is that, first of all, this is a memorandum of understanding. Second, this agreement is doing two things. It's reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and it's stopping further escalation and a broader war from happening. Those are two things Americans currently want. So in that sense, it's not a bad deal. It's a good deal. Where Americans actually disagree with the deal is the amount of money we're now supposedly expected to send to Iran in order to help them rebuild. But, by the way, we wouldn't even have to consider that provision if Israel hadn't dragged us into this war with Iran in the first place. So, I mean, Batya's entire analysis is just so thoroughly dishonest. It's just a bad mischaracterization of everything that's actually taken place. And it's purposeful because, again, she couches it in this whole performance of, I'm America first. I don't care if Israel gets anything out of this, and immediately reverts to Israel, 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 Israel. She goes right into shotgun blasting 20 different talking points from the Israeli perspective about how this benefits Iran and hurts Israel, why Israel should oppose it, why America should oppose it because it hurts Israel and is not really in favor of Israeli interests. And that's the substance of everything she's arguing for. Anyway, Batya's post didn't just exist on social media with no response because, as I mentioned earlier, the White House Rapid Response account responded to it. They wrote, the only humiliation here is Batya desperately begging for an additional brain cell because her failing TV show is even more relevant than the likes of Caitlin Collins and Fake Tapper. Only a moron of her caliber could still doubt President Trump's leadership. Now, again, obviously, this rapid response account is relying on ad hominems here. They're not really responding to Batya on the substance of what she's saying. They're not engaging with her comparison of the vice president to Tucker Carlson. They're not breaking down her argument point by point. They're just ad homing her, which honestly isn't particularly a good response, but this is social media. Social media isn't about good responses. Social media is about humiliating and owning the other person. That's just the reality of X and every other social media platform. Now, that being said, Batya's statements are moronic, objectively. And this is exactly the kind of pushback that becomes inevitable when you consider that some of these folks aren't really even genuine operators in media. And we have further proof of that with Alex, who responded to another statement that Batya made saying that Vice President Vance had unmasked himself. In response to that, Alex posted a screenshot of an article Batya had written years ago saying, since we're unmasking things, let's unmask this. And he pointed out that back in 2016, Batya was wearing Hillary Clinton shirts and calling President Trump the pussy grabber in chief. He also referenced some of her more insane ravings about ostracizing white men from American society. Now, alongside that, he shared screenshots of an article she had written during that period. And honestly, what do we expect These people play both sides. It's partly what this is. They're single-issue voters. You have to support Israel unconditionally. Otherwise, you're just written off and you're an anti-Semite. And look, at this point, we all know that they've been moving to the right because they don't really have a home on the left anymore. But that doesn't mean they've suddenly become America first. In many cases, they're bringing the exact same priorities with them and simply looking for a new coalition through which to pursue them. And that is the Zionist goal of unconditional support for Israel. That's really what it comes down to. Now, there was another rapid response clapback that caught many people's attention on X, but before we get to the response itself, we need to look at the original posts that prompted the interaction. Margot Martin shared a clip of Vice President J.D. Vance where he said this.
But to some of these cabinet members in Israel who are attacking the President of the United States, the other thing that I would say is that over the last 3 months, 2/3 of the defensive weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in.
Now, David Reaboi responded by saying, imagine what kind of online brain rot it takes for a bright, educated guy to morph into a more articulate Theo Von, which is such a ridiculous characterization of what the vice president actually said. The vice president was making a pretty straightforward point. He's essentially saying, we're building the bombs. Why are the Israeli leaders attacking Donald Trump? The reality is that Israel would not be able to defend itself in the way it currently does if the United States were not providing the weapons, the equipment, the material support necessary for that defense. And that's not even getting into the part that J.D. Vance didn't mention, which is the diplomatic and financial backing that has allowed Israel to get away with things on the international stage that many other countries simply would not be able to get away with. Anyway, the White House rapid response account responded to Reaboi saying, imagine what kind of online brain rot it takes to convince yourself that anyone wants to read the dim-witted ravings of a complete nobody like David Reaboi on Substack. Never Trumpers like this loser are the worst thing that ever happened to this country. Disgraceful. Again, obviously, this is another example of the rapid response account relying primarily on ad hominems. They're not really engaging with the substance of what Reaboi is saying. They're just attacking him personally. But once again, this is social media. Social media is not really a place for carefully reasoned debate. It's about humiliating your opponents. It's about scoring points. It's about getting the dunk, getting the win in the eyes of your audience. Naturally, these responses from the rapid response account have generated even more reactions from the Israel First crowd. Marina Medvin responded to the White House's criticism of Batya Ungar-Sargon by saying the White House is using an official government account in an effort to attempt to suppress oppositional speech. They had already used the account inappropriately a few times that I've seen, but this is the most distressing yet. So let me see if I get this straight. Criticizing commentators and journalists is now suppressing speech. I genuinely don't know how you arrived at that conclusion unless we're talking about something completely different here, such as the administration reaching out to social media companies and requesting that certain voices be throttled, censored, hidden, or maybe even made to disappear. If, in fact, they're doing something similar to what the Biden administration was accused of doing, then that's an entirely different conversation. But if they're simply criticizing commentators on social media, who cares? Seriously, criticism is not suppression of speech. Criticism is not censorship. And for a supposed conservative firebrand to make that argument, you have to ask what exactly is being suppressed here. What's being taken away? Is it just the fact that someone criticized your side back? Is it the fact that you're being called out publicly? Is it embarrassment? Is it humiliation? What exactly is this suppression? Because criticism and censorship are not exactly the same thing. Then you have Banshi, a writer for Red State, who responded to the White House's criticism of David Reaboi by asking, where was this energy when Tucker Carlson compared Trump to the Antichrist a few months ago? My response to that is, who cares, bro? Really, the energy is here now. Why does every criticism have to be measured against some completely unrelated event from months ago? Why is everybody constantly demanding disavowals, purity tests, and ideological credentials before someone is allowed to make any sort of criticism? Since when did we arrive at this bizarre culture where nobody's allowed to speak unless they first pass some litmus test that they weren't even aware existed? Apparently now, in this moment in time, before you're allowed to criticize anything, you're supposed to have jumped through a series of invisible hoops from 3 months ago, 6 months ago, maybe even a year ago. Otherwise, your criticism doesn't count. Absurd. Doesn't make any sense. It's just blatant mental retardation. I honestly don't know how to even describe this any further. These people are desperate. They're losing control of the narrative, and they're desperately trying to shoehorn themselves back into the good graces of both the administration and the American public, but it's not going to happen. And it's important to understand that this has nothing to do with ethnicity. It has nothing to do with nationality. It has nothing to do with ordinary Israelis and Jewish people, for that matter. It has everything to do with the leadership of the Israeli government. It has everything to do with people like Itamar Ben-Gvir. It has everything to do with people like Benjamin Netanyahu. It has to do with people who are attacking the president and the vice president of the United States while simultaneously calling for what amounts to ethnic cleansing in Gaza, Lebanon, and elsewhere in the Middle East. It has to do with people like Jonathan Pollard openly talking about attacking Turkey and Egypt and expanding this conflict even further. That's what this is about. This is a crisis in reputation. And what keeps happening is that whenever criticism of the Israeli state emerges, some people immediately retreat into questions about identity in order to shield themselves from criticism of government policy. They go to anti-Semitism. Even when they're Americans, they instinctively shift the conversation away from the actions of the Israeli state and toward their Jewish or Israeli identity itself. And look, I'm not saying everybody does this. I'm specifically talking about a certain class of media personalities, political commentators, and Israeli officials who do this. I don't know whether it comes down to money. I don't know if it comes down to ethnic loyalty. I don't know whether it comes down to national loyalty toward Israel. I don't know whether it's ideological. I don't know whether it's career incentives. It could be any of the things I've described. Whatever it is, these people are sacrificing their integrity and they're standing as Americans in order to defend a state whose leadership has gone completely rogue. You cannot read what Ben-Gvir posted earlier today and come away thinking that this is normal rhetoric. You cannot read someone saying that for every tear shed by an Israeli mother, 1,000 Lebanese mothers must weep, and that all of Lebanon must burn, and not conclude that something has gone profoundly wrong with Israel. How is that proportionate in any sense? We're not talking about an eye for an eye anymore. We're talking about something thousands of times beyond that, because if we were to take Ben-Gvir's statement literally, a mother can shed countless tears over the loss of a child. 8 tears, 100 tears, 1,000 tears. A mother might grieve for years. She might grieve for the rest of her life. So what exactly is being proposed here by Ben-Gvir? Thousands upon thousands of deaths? The entire destruction of a civilization, of a population? Because that's where this rhetoric logically leads. And that's before you even take into account the fact that he said that Lebanon must burn. The reality is that you're never going to sell this sort of perspective to the American public. Most reasonable, grounded, common sense Americans understand that. And look, frankly, being completely candid with you guys, at one point, I may have even supported a broader and more involved American role in aiding and defending Israel. But seeing everything that I've witnessed over the last 4 years, seeing Israeli leaders this confident in calling for basically a genocide, if Israeli leaders are truly this confident about fighting this war that they really want it, then why don't you just go figure it out for yourselves? Let this nation of 9 million people, a country smaller than New Jersey, figure it out on the global stage by itself. Let them fight these wars by themselves. Let them navigate the consequences by themselves, because the truth is that the only reason Israel has not found itself completely isolated internationally is because of the United States singularly. And as the vice president pointed out, it's not just military support and financial support, it's diplomatic cover. American diplomatic support has been one of the most valuable assets Israel has ever had. And I would argue that if that support isn't completely gone yet, it's getting dangerously close. Netanyahu himself has said there may never be an administration more friendly to Israel than the Trump administration. And if even this administration is becoming frustrated, worn out, and increasingly unwilling to tolerate this behavior from Israel, that tells you just how serious the situation has become. Anyway, folks, I do pray for peace. I genuinely do. Nobody should suffer because of the bloodlust of political leaders. Ordinary people should not have to pay the price for the decisions of reckless public officials. The citizens who live under these governments throughout that region in the Middle East should not have to suffer because their leaders are incapable of choosing restraint over escalation. I do pray that cooler heads prevail, and I hope peace ultimately wins out. Anyway, folks, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. I hope you have a terrific day. Peace.